Hello, everyone. Today, our group is presenting on the topic psychology, neurology, and advertising, also known as neuromarketing. Neuromarketing is the use of neuroscience and psychology to study how consumers think and to influence their purchasing decisions. Instead of just asking people what they like, companies now use tools like fMRI and EEG scans to measure emotional reactions, memory, attention, as well as reward responses in the brain. This field became popular in the early 2000s when brain imaging technology became more advanced and accessible. Since then, many major corporations have used neuromarketing to improve advertising effectiveness and brand loyalty. However, as neuromarketing grew, so did public concern. Many critics argue that it goes beyond normal persuasion and becomes subconscious manipulation. There is ongoing debate about whether neuromarketing violates consumer autonomy, whether people can truly give informed consent, and whether government should regulate this kind of advertising. The main ethical issue our group is addressing is the subconscious manipulation of consumers' choice. Consumers may also feel they are making free and rational decisions, but in reality, their emotions and memories can be influenced without their awareness. This is clearly a business ethics issue because companies aim to maximize profits, but ethical business practices measure honesty, transparency, and respect for the consumers. Neuromarketing creates a conflict between profit and consumer autonomy. We chose this topic because it directly affects everyday consumers. It involves advanced science being used to influence behavior, and it raises serious concerns about freedom of choice in modern advertising. To analyze this ethical issue, we will apply three ethical theories: virtue ethics, deontology, and utilitarianism. Among these, our group believes that deontology best analyzes this issue because it focuses on respecting individuals and protecting their right to make informed, autonomous decisions. Our case study, the Pepsi versus Coke neuromarketing experience, will show how branding can influence brain activity and even override actual taste preferences.
Okay, the Pepsi versus Coke debate led to what scientists call the Pepsi paradox. In the 1970s, the Pepsi challenge was everywhere. Customers were to take a blind taste of both sodas, and the majority consistently chose Pepsi. So here's the paradox. Despite the people preferring Pepsi in a blind taste test, Coca-Cola maintained a significantly larger market share and a much higher brand loyalty. So you have to ask why the choice people made in stores was different from the actual test results. To answer this question, researchers led by Samuel McClure decided to use functional magnetic resonance imaging fMRI to scan people's brains as they drank the sodas. They wanted to see the difference between a blind choice and a branded choice. When participants tasted Coca-Cola's sodas without knowing which was which, the only part of the brain that lit up was the VMPFC. This region is strongly linked to basic taste, pleasures, and reward appraisal, meaning the brain registered a greater physical reward from the Pepsi. The result changed dramatically when participants were shown brand name, especially Coca-Cola. Their preference quickly shifted and overwhelmingly chose Coke. Unlike before, the part of the brain that is associated with memory, emotion, and cultural impact were now lit up. Case study sets the stage for our ethical discussion. It proves that advertising can bypass the part of the brain responsible for pure rational evaluation, instead target subconscious centers for emotion and memory. The fMRI results from previously led to led us directly to the core ethical issue that branding can bypass taste centers of of the brain. So the question is it ethical to exploit this? The ethical issue here is the issue of neuroscience to bypass rational choice and shape consumer behavior in ways that not consciously detect or resist. Possible offender here is the advertising and marketing sector, especially businesses that choose to use neuromarketing strategies to circumvent conscious decision making. Customers are the victims of this type of psychological manipulation where emotional and memory based brain systems are used to create brand loyalty if the choice goes against their real taste or their ability to make a smart decision. So they're loyal to Coke despite preferring Pepsi. From a moral or perspective, the argument is centered on autonomy and transparency. Early consumers should make informed, autonomous choices, meaning their decisions should be based on a conscious evaluation of product's quality, not on covert psychological triggers. Neuromarketing is seen as a fundamental problematic, fundamentally problematic because it influences people at the subconscious level, which is inherently manipulative. Therefore, the practice is argued to violate core ethical principles of transparency, fairness, and respect for the consumers. On the other side of the debate, we have the profit or professional perspective, which represent business justification for these practices. Companies generally hold that they should use any effective legal strategy to increase sales. So, from this perspective, neuromarketing is seen as an innovative and competitive and smart business choice. The study simply provides a powerful insight to how people make choices, which brings us to the core conflict of the entire case study. Girls demand that we protect autonomy and honesty in all consumer interactions, but the professional business perspective prioritizes effectiveness, even if that means exploiting psychological vulnerabilities to achieve maximum sales. The rest of our presentation will use three ethical theories: virtue ethics, deontology, and utilitarianism to determine which side of the conflict holds greater weight.
Okay. So, for our first ethical theory, we are focusing on virtue ethics. Now, this is focusing on a person's moral character rather than simply evaluating actions by their outcomes or their adherence to rules. So, instead of asking whether something is effective or technically permissible, virtual ethics mainly ask whether the individuals involved demonstrate the qualities such as honesty, fairness, integrity, respect, and responsibility. So, in this context of marketing, this means that we are going to examine whether the marketers and companies behave in ways that reflect good character, not just whether their campaigns generate profit or follow the legal guidelines. So, when we apply to this framework to this case study, the main question is: are the marketers behind the branding and narrow marketing acting as a virtuous individuals, or narrow marketing intentionally targets the emotional and memory related parts of the brain to influence consumers below the level of the conscious awareness? So, if marketers knowingly use strategies that shape people's choices without their informed understanding, then we must consider whether this aligns with the virtues like honesty or fairness. Manipulating consumers at a subconscious level can cross into a deceptive territory because this can restrict their ability to make autonomous, well informed decisions. Next, a marketer with a strong moral character would would prioritize transparency and the respect for the consumer autonomy, such as an individual who would openly communicate how their marketing techniques function, avoid exploiting physiological vulnerabilities, and ensure that consumers have the freedom to make choices without hidden manipulation. Virtue ethics emphasizes that ethical marketing should support consumers' well being, not just simply exploiting their cognitive biases. So, for the Pepsi versus Coke neuromarketing experiment, this further illustrates these concerns. The results showed that the branding alone influenced people's preferences by activating the emotional associations, even when the taste remained the same. Um, Virtue ethics encourages us to reflect on what this can imply about the marketeer's character. If the success of a campaign depends on a convert of these physiological influence rather than the truthful, respectful persuasion, then the marketeers may not be embodying virtues such as integrity, honesty, or respect for the consumers. So, overall, the virtue ethics suggests that narrow marketing and branding practices are ethically acceptable only when they align with virtuous character traits. So, if the marketeers rely on manipulation, deception, or exploitation, virtue ethics would judge these actions as morally wrong, not because of the outcomes they produce, but because they reveal a deficiency in the moral character of the individuals and the organizations engaging in them. And then we'll transition into the next theory.
So the second theory we're going to be talking about is going to be deontology. So deontology is an ethical theory that judges actions based on moral rules and duties, not on consequences. The most influential deontology thinker is Immanuel Kant. So he's basically the guy who is responsible for the perspective called a Kantian perspective. This is basically a moral framework that emphasizes duty and universal moral law and inherited dignity of every individual as opposed to focusing on the consequences of an action. So essentially, he's basically talking about, just actions, moral actions, and your morality rather than just consequences of what a decision could happen. So the three major Cation principles that applies directly to marketing is first, respect for autonomy. Consumers must be allowed to make free, rational, and informed choices. The second one would be honesty and truthfulness. Marketers have a duty to not be decisive, not to mislead, or to distort reality. The third thing would be the rule that people must never be treated only as a means to an end. If consumers are treated purely as a psychological target for profit rather than just rational decision making, that violates Kant's core moral law. And these are the three things that should be applied for just any types of marketing. So, regardless of profits, popularity, or business success. So, in the Pepsi versus Coke case, neuromarketing and branding influence people's preferences by activating emotional and memory based responses in the brain. From a deological perspective, the core question becomes, are consumers being respected as rational decision makers, or are they being manipulated as psychological tools? If branding bypasses rational thought and instead targets subconscious biases without informed awareness, then that would violate the duty to respect autonomy. The consumer is no longer choosing freely, they are being steered emotionally. This turns the consumer into a means of profits, which Kant explicitly forbids. So, another key of the pension duty is truthfulness. Branding often doesn't lie directly, but it can mislead, creating emotional associations that distort the product's real quality. For example, in this situation, Coke is being perceived as better tasting purely due to emotional branding rather than actual taste differences. then consumers are being misled to at a psychological level under Kant. It's still even a nonverbal or emotional deceptive violation of the moral duty of the company and the marketers, and it interferes with just rational judgment. A deontological problem would be neuromarketing has this issue of consent. So consumers are generally not aware of the brain activity, memory, or even emotions during the testing, and are being intentionally targeted for not for through neuroscience based branding. Since Cation ethics require moral participation, the lack of consent makes this form of marketing ethically suspicious. And without knowledge or consent, the consumer cannot fully exercise their autonomy. So, unlike utilitarianism, deontology does not allow good to justify unethical actions, even if neuromarketing increases profits, boosts employment, or even make consumers happy. Kant would argue that these outcomes do not excuse violating moral duties. If the method itself is manipulative, decisive, or just disrespectful to autonomy, then it remains unethical regardless of success. So, under deontology, the use of neuromarketing and subconscious branding in the Pepsi versus Coke case is likely is ethically impermissible because it violates the duty of the respect of the consumer's autonomy. It also violates the duties of honesty, and it also violates the rule against treating people merely as just a means of profits. Even if the branding sales increase, enjoyment has gone up, all the brand loyalty has also gone up. Vacation ethics would still label it as unethical because it undermines the rational agency and consent.
So the last theory we have was utilitarianism. Here, we're basically just asking one big question. Does using neuromarketing actually create more overall good than harm? That's the whole idea behind this theory. The greatest good for the greatest number. So let's look at the possible positives first. From the company side, neuromarketing helps Pepsi or Coke advertise more effectively, boost sales, and stay competitive. They can lead to more jobs, more innovation, and they can even create products that people genuinely enjoy. And honestly, if someone sees the Coke logo and it triggers happy memories or a feeling of comfort, utilitarianism would count that as a kind of benefit. People feel good, and that happiness makes matters in this framework. But then we have to also look at the negatives, and this is where things get kind of tricky. Neuromarketing works by influencing parts of the brain people aren't consciously aware about. That's the emotional and memory centers. So consumers might think they're making a free choice, but the company is actually nudging them on a subconscious level. That can lead people to buy something they might not have chosen if they were fully informed. When you step back and look at the bigger picture, there are larger harms too. Sugary drinks contribute to health issues, and if advertising keeps getting more manipulative, people may start losing trust in marketing altogether. So, from a utilitarian standpoint, it really comes down to weighing all of that. If the happiness people get from the branding and the economic benefits outweigh the manipulation and health risks, then practice might be considered ethical. But if the harm, especially the subconscious manipulation and long term societal effects, is greater, then utilitarianism would say it's unethical. The main takeaway here is that utilitarianism doesn't automatically say neuromarketing is right or wrong. It just asks us to step back and say, when we add up all the benefits and all the harms, does this actually make life better for most people or not? That's the core question utilitarians would use to judge this case. Now our discussion.
So for the discussion, we all came together and agreed, and behind the scenes, by the way, we all agreed that deontology would be the best theory for this situation. And I just wanted to ask everybody, why do you think so?
Mm, I'll go first. I think that because dentology provides it provides a strong ethical lens for analyzing this issue, while the second ethical theory, utilitarianism, um, is kind of helpful just for weighing the potential harms and benefits. It only focuses on the outcome, while the real problem here is not just to whether the marketing increases sales or creates a positive results. It's just like the inherent violation of the consumer autonomy, where um, deontology just focuses on something else, which I think I don't know. Someone can continue on for me.
For sure. I mean, I agree with that. I think like how you said, I mean, utilitarianism is more so of like an opinion based thing,
Mhm.
whereas deontology is more so directed like at the core issue of the case, which is the violation of consumer autonomy. And so neuromarketing also, I mean, like we said, uh, with utilitarianism, it works with like a subconscious level. So, or sorry, neuromarketing works by influencing people at a subconscious level. So the other theories I feel like aren't really um, based around that. They're more so just like on everyone's like individual opinion. But that's about it for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, so uh, what I was just gonna say that I do also agree with what you both said about how deontology is the best fitting theory for marketing because it's completely making you self-aware of the things that you're doing for testing, for all kinds of just product reviews and all these things, right? So, because virtue ethics is more like just focusing on the character of marketing and it kind of lacks virtuous character. So, they kind of prioritize profit over just moral responsibility, but they are still honest and they're still fair, but they're not really thinking about the other moral responsibilities. While utilitarianism is basically just completely harmful in every way possible, yet it still benefits profit, consumer satisfaction, and economic activity. But with the consequences, or I would say with the trade off of just having manipulation happening in the back, health risks happening, exploitation, and just long term loss of trust. And if that becomes a long term thing, again, it's in the name. If it's a long term thing, it becomes a problem in the future. Long term trust also becomes a problem. People are going to start saying things about the companies, such as, Coke, like Coca Cola doing these things left and right, or Pepsi doing this left and right. And then it's going to hurt the business overall. That's why I think that deontology is the best to do everything because it's just morally correct. There's no explanation to it. There is no, diving deep into it. It's just you don't need to like violate somebody's, mental health or their neurology or their autonomy just to test a certain product. Like you have to taste the soda, which is better, this and that. There's no need to violate somebody to do all of that.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
also totally agree with three of you guys. Like, to me, the biggest problem is that consumers think that they are choosing freely, but their emotions and memories are being triggered at the subconscious level. That feels manipulative because you're not giving people a fair chance to think rationally. It's like the brain is being persuaded before the person even knows what's happening. From a deontological view, this treats people as mean to an end rather than a rational individuals. Even if companies are getting financially, that action is still morally wrong because it violates basic duties of honesty and respect. So I also believe that Deontology best analyzes this issue because it mostly focuses on respect for consumer autonomy and informed consent, not just profit or outcome.
Nicole, you got something?
Yeah. Well, I just think it's kind of interesting because from like a deontology standpoint, what the companies are doing is wrong, but from like the utilitarianism, it is ethically okay because it is having the best outcome for both like shareholders and stakeholders. So,
So I
yeah.
just want to ask a certain question, maybe like one or two of them, but I want to ask one question. This is basically the business versus morality part of it. That's why I just want to ask you guys. So if anyone want to answer it, go right ahead. I think everybody should have their take on this one. But if neuromarketing is legal and profitable, right? Should companies kind of limit themselves morally, or is it profit the priority? That's what I just want to ask.
I feel like for that, especially like these two companies, it's more so profit. It's not really like
Yeah,
moral.
yeah, but
Especially,
I also
yeah,
think it kind of goes into the theme with like stakeholder theory and shareholder theory. Like,
yeah,
is it better for like the community versus just, company? Like,
yeah.
yeah.
And that's true. I think like the out of everybody, the companies the ones that are really benefiting, and even like let's say like the community, the consumers, they're not really. They think they're benefiting because they get something nice out of it, but overall, it's just again, it's like a subconscious manipulation because it goes back to like how honesty, fairness, and integrity. Those two companies aren't really giving that to people.
Mm.
So anybody else got more on this take? Or that's all
No,
that's all the answers you got.
that's pretty much. I just agree. I just wanted to know like your guys' overall thought on this case. I'll just like kind of go first. Just this case kind of just made me like really rethink like people should just make smart choices. Just basically, just the whole point of neuromarketing just makes it harder for people to make smart, informed choices since a lot of the influence is happening subconsciously. So it just like feels like the companies are intentionally like tapping into like vulnerabilities rather than like presenting like actual like information. So just like after seeing like the whole how brain reacts in the fRMI study part, that's like kind of where it made me like agree to the deontology part.
Yeah, that I also agree to that part too. When companies they find an easier solution to make profit, they will absolutely go for that. If with the means of like having a major layoff, laying off, let's say maybe about 15,000 to about 500,000 people off the company just to make some like, saving money or to, have their profits not drop to the ground or something, then they will absolutely do something like that. Whatever it takes to make some profit without, you know, it doesn't matter what they do. They just want to make money. That's the point of it. That's the point of running a business is to make money. Nobody cares about how they should do it. They just want to have it done. So, by any means necessary, even if it's unethical, which is not exactly the best thing to do, but by any means necessary, they will do whatever it takes for them to make more money and be the top of the competition. Basically, the end of our podcast. I do appreciate you for listening to us and our takes on just, the neurology of how business work and so forth.